Yeah, the two that are probably the most famous were a guy named Robert Daniel. He was born in 1646 in Wales, came over to the U.S., came over to Charleston, South Carolina, actually, through Barbados. He was a ship captain, but I haven't ever found the manifest of the ship. I've got the ship's name, but can't find the manifest for it. So to see if any other people were on the ship, if it was whether or not he was transporting people or whatever he was transporting. But he ended up in Charleston, and he was, over a period of time, was named the, how would I say this, the first colonial governor of both North and the South Carolina territories. But also he owned part of Parris Island, which is now the Marine Corps Island. And today there's an island called Daniel Island just across the river from Charleston, and he used to own that. So, and that was given to him by, I think, the Queen of England or Queen of some kind of royalty was given that property, but I don't know exactly who that was. So, but one of the things about him is back in the 1708, 1710 time frame, the English were sent down to St. Augustine to basically run the Spanish out of St. Augustine. They did, went down there. Colonel Daniel was in charge of the land forces. Colonel Moore was in charge of the naval forces. So essentially the land forces burned down St. Augustine. There's a few things still left, but primarily burned it down. But after they, ran the Spanish out, they left. And then the Spanish came right back. So I don't know why they didn't stay or whatever, but they didn't for some reason. And then my fourth great grandfather grew up around the Athens area, around Watkinsville, Danielsville, whatever, over in there. And he was
Danielsville's named for your family.
his name for part of the family. And also Daniel Field in Augusta, which is the small airport, is named for part of the family. And he was a big farmer, and he was married to, her last name was Melton, and I've actually traced her back. Part of her ancestors are buried in Jamestown, Virginia. But I don't know a whole lot about that side. But they were married and had 13 kids, and she passed away, and he married another lady 30 years younger than him and had 11 more kids. So he had 24 kids. So who knows? I'm, like I said, pretty much related to probably everybody in the state, distantly. So.
Now there are Daniels in Cobb County that spell it with 2 L's and others with 1 L. Are you all related, or?
Some of us are. There's some in Douglasville that have 2 L's that I'm related to. Some in Cobb County that have 2 L's that I'm really related to. But it went from 2 L's to 1 L back in the mid 1850s for the most part. But there's still some people that use the 2 L's. But I haven't found anybody that used the L and S yet on my side. So.
Who was the first Daniel to be in Cobb County in your family?
That I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet.
Okay.
So it's another part of the puzzle. So.
Okay, so your parents moved to Ackworth in 1953.
Yes. As far as downtown Ackworth, it's changed because they basically got rid of half of the buildings on one side of the street, but they had to put in the parking, and I understand that. But the other side of the street, from an appearance standpoint, looks virtually the same as it was when I was here. It's been the same, and that's why when I come back, it's like going down memory lane. Of course, it's gotten larger, but I think the local government, the History Foundation and all that stuff has really kept Ackworth the way it has been and hopefully will be in the future. To me, it has an at-home feel, and I'm glad to see that they're working on the Mill District, which was a big part of the history of the town with the Coates and Clark's mill and whatever. There used to be a lumber mill down there. There used to be a lot of people that were involved in that kind of work that lived in that end of town. But I'm glad to see that they're bringing that back. And hopefully they'll do something on the north end at some point too. I mean, they've got their, they're pretty full right now doing what they're doing. But I think that what the History Foundation has done is just amazing, and I'm glad to have been a part of some of that too. But to me, I see Acworth differently than probably a lot of people do. A lot of people, people that didn't live here, they may drive into town and say, "Oh, this is a neat looking little town, da 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 da." I look at it and I'm going, I remember when I used to sit at that little bench in front of what's now Henry's. It was Allen Five a Dime. I'd sit there on Saturday and I just people walk by and talk to people and whatever. I see places like that a lot of people probably don't see. I see that where Dr. Cobble's office was up the street. Been there many, many times. And where Acworth Pharmacy used to be. Yeah. In fact, the old building at Acworth Pharmacy that was on Main Street used to have downstairs had a soda shop, where you could get, ice cream and milkshakes and that kind of stuff. And then the same thing, you had Lacey's Drugs up the street too. They had the same thing. But I look at it as the buildings of what they are now and what they used to be, and the stories about what used to be. Like, for instance, a big one that I go to a lot is Center Street Tavern. That used to be the North Cobb Hardware, which was run by the Parker family. And I go in there and sit now, and the inside of it hasn't changed that much. I can still remember where they had the paint and the nails and all of this kind of stuff just by sitting there. But that's the way I look at it. Other people may look at it, oh, this is a neat place with the old wood and all that. I look at it as differently because of those memories.
Did you know the McCalls?
Oh, yes. Mary McCall was, quote, the nurse. Her husband, Dr. McCall, was a doctor, but later on in years he had arthritis real bad. So Mary did most of the doctoring. In fact, many times I'd go to their house, or they would make a house call, but it was kind of like going to a barbershop. You didn't have appointments. Yeah. You just went up there and you waited in line, Okay. And it was just. But yeah, I knew them well. Went to school with a couple of them.
Their kids would have been about your age, wouldn't they?
Yeah, the two that was closest to me were Claire, who was a year or two older than me, and Merle, who was a year or two behind me. Okay. Those were the two that I knew well. Now, my sisters knew Sue and Mose, and I can't remember, there was a number of them, but they knew all of them because they were older.
Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered?
No, it's just, I'm glad to have the memories. And I'm sure that a lot of people, whether they grew up in Acworth or they grew up in Kansas or wherever they grew up, New York, whatever, if they grew up in those towns, they have, a lot of them, they go back and have the same memories, but of those. And I feel very, very fortunate, one, to be in this town, grow up in this town, but also to grow up in this part of the country and to grow up in this country. I mean, you think about it, you could have been born in any place in the world, but I was here. And that's what means the most to me.